Coming up, division rivalry games have big implications this week. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are listening to Locked On Game to Game NFL, local experts taking you from game to game and previewing your matchups for Week 13 of the NFL season. I am your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. The Thursday night football matchup between the Patriots and the Bills saw Buffalo get their first divisional win of the season after they had some tough ones against the Jets and the Dolphins earlier this year. As for the Pats, they played it safe, and their play calling really came back to bite them in the butt. Locked On Patriots says it cost them the game and potentially a playoff spot.
A listless performance on offense and inability to contain on defense dooms the New England Patriots to a 24-10 loss to the Buffalo Bills on Thursday night at Gillette Stadium. The loss dropping the Patriots to 6-6 on the 2022 NFL season and putting a severe dent in their postseason hopes. I'm Mike Debate, host of Locked On Patriots, and outside of the dynamic Marcus Jones 48-yard touchdown, the Patriots' offensive effort just continues to avoid the loss as opposed to playing to win. And while there's a time and a place for conservatism, a Week 13 matchup against a divisional rival when you're fighting to keep your postseason hopes alive just is not the time to do it. The Patriots once again anemic on third down. Several of Mac Jones' passes to try to get third downs end up hitting the target short of the first down marker. Way too conservative, way too safe, and the New England Patriots continue to suffer the consequences. On defense, not much better. The Pats were not able to find an answer to contain Josh Allen, who did a very good job of playing through the Patriots' man coverage and zone. We're going to continue to break this one down all week long on Locked On Patriots, so please continue to stay safe, stay well, and download, subscribe, and follow Locked On Patriots wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, Locked On Patriots is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Packers season ostensibly over at this point, but sometimes numbers and stats go out the window when you're playing your rival. Locked On Packers begging for the Pack to stop the Bears' running attack or at least just try to slow them down.
Stop the run. That's all I want this holiday season. Santa, I promise, I've been a good boy this year. Just have the Packers stop the run. I'm Peter Bukowski, host of Locked On Packers, and that is it. That is the whole game. If the Packers can not even stop, slow down the Bears' running attack, they can win by 2 touchdowns. Justin Fields or no Justin Fields. If you can slow down this team, by the way, especially if Justin Fields plays, you better slow down the run. You better slow him down. If the Packers stop the run, the Bears will not be able to move the ball enough because this Bears defense cannot stop a nosebleed with a blanket. It doesn't matter. The Packers are going to score. If you can stop the run, the Bears can't score. Now, this is the problem. The Packers can't stop the run. So I made the joke about the Bears defense. The Packers defense, it's so bad against the run. It's so bad. Just one time. Do it one time for Aaron Rodgers. This might be his last time in a Packers uniform against the Bears. Just stop the run once, please.
2 division leaders will meet up on Sunday as the NFC East leading Eagles host the AFC South leading Tennessee Titans. Both Locked On Eagles and Locked On Titans are honing in on run game defense being the biggest key for their team.
The Philadelphia Eagles take on the Tennessee Titans, where the Eagles sit 10-1. Can they continue their streak? I'm Gino Camilleri, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. The Philadelphia Eagles are taking on yet again another true dominant rushing offense. Can their rush defense and that interior of the defensive line hold up once again like they did against Jonathan Taylor 2 weeks ago, A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones last week? It's another tough test against Derrick Henry, because if Derrick Henry continues to be who he is and the Eagles load the box, that opens up the play action game for Tennessee, and Ryan Tannehill can make you pay in that manner. The Eagles have to come home, swarm to the football, fill their gaps, and just play sound fundamental football to get to 11-0. Another big win for the Philadelphia Eagles is on the horizon. I'm Gino Camilleri, host of Locked On Eagles podcast. Check us out wherever you get your shows. 5 days a week. Fly, Eagles, fly.
The Tennessee Titans will need to shut down the multifaceted running attack of the Philadelphia Eagles if they hope to come out victorious in Week 13. My name's Tyler Rowland, host of the Locked On Titans podcast. The Eagles ran for over 300 yards in their previous game. Not only can they hand it to their running back in Miles Sanders, but quarterback Jalen Hurts is incredibly deadly in the run game as well. The Titans last week were suspicious against a 30th ranked Bengals run offense. The Titans defense gave over 100 yards on the ground to the Bengals. Well, if the Titans did that against a poor rushing team, what will they be able to do against one of the best running teams in the NFL in the Eagles? The Titans will have to find their run defense once more to set up third and long situations where they can play zone so that they don't have to play man on third and short and get exposed by the Philadelphia Eagles wide receivers. The Titans must stop the run to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. For more analysis, check out the Locked On Titans podcast, free and available on all platforms. Locked On Titans, it's your team every day.
The Broncos have not been cooking up much of anything lately, with Russell Wilson and the offense seriously underperforming. Locked On Broncos goes over what Denver is going to have to do if they want to beat Baltimore in Week 13.
Can a struggling Denver Broncos team find a way to limit or slow down Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens, on Sunday? I'm Cody Rourke, host of Locked On Broncos, and for the Broncos, this season has not gone how anybody has anticipated. Sitting at 3-8, the schedule doesn't get any easier for a team that has struggled on the offensive side of the ball, and for the last 2 weeks on the defensive side of the ball, they've given up a lot of yards on the ground. You look at the Baltimore Ravens, who's very successful with Lamar Jackson on the ground, not to mention J.K. Dobbins on the ground. They have a strong established run game and power zone scheme. It's going to present a little bit of a challenge here for this Broncos football team. But you know what? Stranger things have happened in the National Football League. Can Denver go on the road this Sunday and surprise the Baltimore Ravens, who just dropped a little bit of a shocker against the Jacksonville Jaguars last week? Make sure you check out Locked On Broncos, free and available everywhere you get your podcast in audio format or whether you watch on YouTube.
Certainly a lot of off-the-field storylines as Deshaun Watson is making his return from his suspension, and he's going to do it against his old team, the Houston Texans, this week. Locked On Texans goes over the huge effort it will take for Houston if they want to upset the Browns.
The Houston Texans will welcome Deshaun Watson back to the NFL, but unfortunately as a member of the Cleveland Browns. I'm Cody Davis, one half of the Locked On Texans podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, the Houston Texans are entering Sunday's matchup against the Cleveland Browns with a 1-9-1 record. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the Houston Texans are going to come away victorious in this game. But if they do, they have to do three simple things. Number one, they have to contain Nick Chubb in the Cleveland Browns rushing attack. Unfortunately, the Houston Texans have the worst run defense in the league, giving up an average of 168 yards on the ground. And when you take a look at Nick Chubb, one of the best running backs in the game, Nick has already recorded not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 6 games where he has eclipsed over 100 yards on the ground. Unfortunately for the Houston Texans, they have already allowed 5 running backs to eclipse over 100. And in a loss against the Tennessee Titans, Derrick Henry rushed for over 200 yards. So, of course, stopping the run is going to be their top priorities. For more on the Houston Texans matchup against the Cleveland Browns, please be sure to check out myself and my co-host, Johnson Sports Guy Hickman, over at Locked On Texans.
The Dolphins are going to try and keep pace with the Bills in the AFC East, but it won't be easy on the road in San Francisco. Locked On Dolphins says it may come down to a good scheme from Mike McDaniel against his old team.
The Miami Dolphins looking to secure their 3rd consecutive winning season against the San Francisco 49ers, and they're going to have to be able to account for Nick Bosa to get it done. Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, and the Dolphins are seeking their 9th win of the season in Week 13 in San Francisco as a first part of a 2-week back-to-back trip on the West Coast. Against the 49ers, the Dolphins are expecting to play without offensive tackle Teron Armstead, who suffered a grade 2 pec strain against the Houston Texans. Dolphins have plenty of speed on the perimeter, they have plenty of playmakers in space, and it will be up to the Dolphins to scheme up ways to slow down Nick Bosa and make sure that that explosive offense can continue to hang points on the board as they seek yet another 30-point offensive performance.
Coming up, the Chiefs have one of their toughest road games of the year. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Prize Picks. It is a super simple way for you to play daily fantasy sports. What you do is you pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against anyone else. You're just competing against those projections. So that's what makes it really simple. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. So if you deposit 100, Prize Picks will give you 100. If you deposit 50, Prize Picks will give you 50. Don't forget to enter that promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. Welcome back to Locked On Game to Game NFL. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. The Chiefs will take on the defending AFC champions in Cincinnati for Week 13. Locked On Chiefs is expecting a high-scoring affair on Sunday afternoon.
And your Kansas City Chiefs head to the Cincinnati Bengals this weekend to play Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon. All of those guys should be available in this game. This is a huge game for Kansas City. If they lock up this game, the rest of their schedule is a lot easier, and they will be sitting in a great position for the playoffs. When you look at this game, the big keys to me, can the wide receivers of the Bengals destroy Kansas City's corners as they did last year in much of the games? They don't have Fenton. They don't have Shavarius Ward anymore. How will the rookies fare against these Bengals? And then the other question is how does Cincinnati's defense stop Patrick Mahomes? They've been successful the past 2 times that they played him, holding him to 3 points in the second half. You absolutely cannot have that going into the second half of this game. I do think this is going to be a high-scoring affair. So it's how is Kansas City's offense going to deal with the changes that are made for second-half adjustments by the Bengals D?
At 6-5, the Chargers cannot play it safe this week against the Raiders if they want to continue that playoff push. Locked On Chargers goes over the keys to victory for LA.
The Chargers cannot take the Las Vegas Raiders lightly in this second and final matchup. This is David Drogemeyer of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and your keys to victory starting on offense for the Chargers is to throw the football. Be aggressive against this 26th ranked passing yards allowed defense. There's a lot of yards out there, especially over the middle. The linebackers are particularly susceptible against the pass, so the tight ends and Austin Eckler, the running back, should have a lot of room to roam over the middle. On defense, it's about stopping 2 guys. It's about limiting the effectiveness of Devontae Adams. You need to bracket him, make sure that he is double covered at all times, and be ready to go up against the monster that is Josh Jacobs, coming off a 300-plus all-purpose yards performance last week. He is leading the NFL in rushing yards. He is a handful. The Chargers need to be ready for his attack. But for more on this game and for more on the Chargers, please check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, your team every day.
Sunday Night Football has the potential to be a really good matchup. That is if Indianapolis actually shows up to play this week. Locked On Colts and Locked On Cowboys preview what we can expect to see in primetime.
The Indianapolis Colts are back on primetime this week as they travel to the Lone Star State to take on the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. But I think we're all wondering what version of the Colts we're actually going to see out there on the field. This is Jake Arthur of the Locked On Colts podcast. So first things first with the Colts, we've seen them come out really competitive and look good against the Raiders and Eagles in recent weeks, but then they were just flat last week on Monday Night Football against the Steelers in a home loss. So what are they going to look like? Luckily for them, the Cowboys have a tendency to play down to their competition, so all hope is not lost there. If there's an area of Dallas's defense that the Colts could attack, it's their bottom 10 run game. They allow over 130 yards per game, and the Colts offense really never looks better than when Jonathan Taylor is clicking on all cylinders. If they can't establish the run, however, it might be a rough day at the office because Dallas does boast the top pass defense in the league, and we know how things have looked with Matt Ryan in the Colts passing game for most of the season. We'll have much more on this matchup this week on Locked On Colts. Check us out every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The key to victory for the Dallas Cowboys this week against the Indianapolis Colts is to make sure to not allow Indianapolis's run game run all over Dallas. Hi, I'm Landon McCool with the Locked On Cowboys podcast, and going into this week against a hurting Indianapolis Colts team that has struggled and had already had a coaching change and several quarterback changes, The Cowboys need to make sure that they don't have a huge letdown. And the best way to do that is to make sure that the Indianapolis run game doesn't get started. The Indianapolis Colts don't have a fantastic offense. They're ranked in the bottom 2 to 3 spots in most statistical categories on offense. And their defense is probably middle of the road. I think really the one way that the Cowboys could really manage to lose this game is if they allow Jonathan Taylor and the Indianapolis Colts running game to get started, control the ball, and control the clock, and then potentially make things a little bit difficult for the Cowboys offense on the defensive side of the ball. The Cowboys need to eliminate all of this. They need to eliminate the run game from the options for the Indianapolis Colts. They need to put them in passing situations where Matt Ryan is going to be forced to drop back and the Cowboys pass rush can get after him. And they need to score a bunch of points so that Indianapolis doesn't even think that the run game is an option. Outside of that, the Cowboys are the more talented of the two teams. They have to find a way to make sure that that talent shines through and not let this game get away from them by a keep-away match with Jonathan Taylor and the Indianapolis Colts. For more on the Dallas Cowboys, make sure you check us out on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And for more on any of your teams, check out the podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
The Jags will try to build off last week's impressive comeback win. This time they will take on the Lions. Locked On Jags preaches consistency for this young and talented roster.
The Jaguars need to just have nice things. I'm Tony Wiggins with the Locked On Jaguars podcast, and here's the Jaguars' keys to victory versus Detroit. They have to just win another game, be able to string them together after the momentum game that they got last week against the Baltimore Ravens. Now they have to go up and beat a team that they think they might be capable of beating instead of playing lights out against a team that no one gave them a chance to win. It's a good, tough road game with a team that has played really, really well as of late. They have to stop the run. I think that's the first and foremost thing that they must do, and get off the field on third down and win the battle of time of possession so they don't get tired in the end. Make sure you check me out daily on the Locked On Jaguars podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
At this point, the NFC South is still a dumpster fire, but historically, the Saints and Bucks have had some pretty good matchups, at least the last couple of years. Locked On Saints goes over what New Orleans is going to need to do to get the job done on Monday Night Football.
It's time to throw caution to the wind. If you're Dennis Allen and the New Orleans Saints, I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. The New Orleans Saints want to get a big-time upset win on the road on Monday Night Football against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to need a couple things. The first of which is going to be, first of all, Andy Dalton to be able to work through the primetime woes that have limited him throughout his career in those primetime matchups. But more importantly, the New Orleans Saints just need to throw the kitchen sink out on that field. Throw caution to the wind, y'all. Get through that call sheet. Line up Taysom Hill at punter. Line him up at corner. Line him up at quarterback. Do everything that you need to do in order to get a win. What would be a marquee win for the New Orleans Saints, by the way. Not necessarily one that you look at and say, okay, that's going to turn the season around for them. But, man, going into the bye week, it would be so sweet just to be able to play a little bit of spoilers against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and keep the NFC South interesting, as it has been absolutely pitiful so far. New Orleans Saints can keep that going with a win against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You want to know more about what the New Orleans Saints can do to get that W in Raymond James Stadium? We're breaking it all down every step of the way on the Locked On Saints podcast, free and available on all podcast apps every single Monday through Friday. Proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Now, Game to Game. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure that you subscribe to Locked On NFL and your favorite teams Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Kainani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.